By the way, we, or at least I, on this podcast, I had said that we were going to be doing an after show or a post show, I guess, for the White House Plumbers miniseries on HBO, where we were going to do a podcast after every episode and then air it the next day. And but we're not doing that. We're not doing that. What we are going to do is we're going to do a recap show once the series is over. So we'll do the whole series in one episode, and we may even have a guest for that. But anyway, that's enough out of you. Podcast. I am Bill Rader, your host, I guess. Sean, would you just say I'm the main host?
You can call yourself the main host if you want, buddy.
Main host. All right. I'm the main host of the show, and Sean is the other host, Sean Kane. And Sean, I know we've been kind of messaging back and forth, talking about some of the feedback that we're getting. I know you said that, first of all, we're getting a ton of feedback, ton of questions and feedback from our listeners, and we thank you. But every time somebody puts in one of these profanity-laced comments in YouTube, it gets deleted right away. But Sean, what did you do? You screenshotted it or something? Or
yeah, well, I was able to get one of them written down, Billy. When we go over the question episode, we can read that one.
All right, yeah.
And we'll just, you could just use your imagination of what we're going to keep out of it, because we won't read the profanity, but we read the statement there. Yeah. It was kind of negative, and we got actually a couple of them, Billy. We'll cover those.
All right, sounds good. All right, Sean, what else you want to talk about? I know we got a good topic today, but keep a couple of things. Keep
those questions coming, Billy, because we'll be doing a question episode. We'll try to do it, as a bonus episode regularly. So keep them coming in. We got over like 45. We'll get to them, But we just want to mention we got two new patrons, Marty Kane and Michael Pilch.
All right.
So thank you for those guys. And
thanks, guys.
And anybody that could help out in Patreon, it's a great. It expands our base, helps us cover costs. We put it back into the business to cover and helps us get potential advertisers, and it's great. So thanks to those two guys, and they got some questions, Bill, and comments, and we'll get to them on a question episode.
All right.
The other thing I want to mention, Bill, is you got your first article up.
Yeah.
It was really good. You gave a nice shot to the media. Which I loved. It was well written, and the response was really good, Billy. You got some really good numbers on it.
Yeah.
So congratulations, buddy.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate it. I'll be working on another one too, but just wanted to get something up there. I felt the need to, I don't know, that was kind of rattling around in my head. I wanted to get that out. So it was nice to be able to write that down and get that posted right on there.
And Bill, so we got the positive stuff out of the way. So before we get to our topic, we have to get to the negative, Bill, because news broke that Al Pacino is going to be in a movie. And it's based on this complete garbage lie that we've been trying to tell the truth about on our podcast about, Sam Giancana, the from Chicago, the gangster from Chicago, that helped Kennedy rig the election, and then he is later would be involved in masterminding assassination of Kennedy as payback. And it's a movie based on this lie, Bill, and it's. I wrote an article on it, Bill, and it's one of our highest rated articles. It's closing in on the Marilyn Monroe article already. And it's just so frustrating, Bill, because, and Al Pacino, who I love, he's one of my favorite actors. He gets a major hit from this because, these guys in Hollywood always talk about, I do my research on a role and I get, that's a bunch of garbage. I put him right with Tom Hanks. If he did a research on his role, he would understand that this is a complete lie. And it's a problem, Bill, for two guys from Archibald trying to tell the truth. And here comes Al Pacino, one of the most iconic actors in Hollywood, and he gets involved in this project that's a complete garbage project. And the media will do their part. They won't bash it like they bashed Oliver with his movie JFK, because it embarrasses the Kennedys. And I got to also question, Bill, the timing of this. You're going to see a lot of this mob did it stuff coming out now. And a lot of it, Tucker Carlson is out there saying the CIA killed Kennedy. Robert Kennedy Jr. is out there saying the CIA killed his dad and his uncle. And I got to wonder if a lot of this stuff is being funded from Langley and the CIA, because it distracts and puts the blame on the mafia. And Bill, in my article I wrote, there's a couple important things to understand here. And I can't say this clear enough. Sam Giancana, at no time in history, was ever the boss of the outfit in Chicago. He was a front boss. He was a street boss. He reported to Tony Accardo and Paul Ricca. He was basically a glorified captain, Bill. He would not have any authorization to rig an election nationally or assassinate a president. The mafia is like a dictatorship, Bill. It's run by the commission and it's run by the outfit.
Right.
And the fact of the matter, if you read my article, there's no doubt about it that the mob was supporting Richard Nixon in 1960. I put evidence in there, Bill. I put an FBI report signed off by William Sullivan, who we talked about on the show, an informant in Jimmy Hoffa's union, Ed Parton, told the FBI that Jimmy Hoffa and Carlos Marcello, the boss of New Orleans, met in September before the election in 1960. Marcello had 2 suitcases, $500K in each suitcase, and half was from him and half was from New York, New Jersey, and Florida, which would have been Trafficante, would have been the Declavente, the family in Jersey that's based on The Sopranos, and from the commission. And it was for campaign contributions to Richard Nixon. So that shows you right there, Bill, that the national structure of the mafia was supporting Richard Nixon in 1960.
Yeah.
So there's no way a rogue gangster who's a glorified captain could go against that. And Bill, we did an episode where I did the work of the guy. I went over to work with the guy that investigated that election, and he put the numbers out. And the numbers were understated. There was no way that the mob rigged that election. So this is just nonsense, Bill. And it frustrates me to no end because it's going to get a lot of press.
And when does this movie come out, Sean?
I don't know, Bill. I don't know. I think it's coming out within probably the next year.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the 60th anniversary coming up. I'm sure the Hollywood's trying to cash in on that.
And listen, Bill, it'll probably be entertaining. I mean, Pacino's a great actor.
Sure.
It's going to be entertaining, but you got to remember it's based completely on a lie. And in the media that bashed Oliver Stone for his movie JFK, which actually is understated. I mean, that movie, they bashed him before the movie came out. They'll probably be praising this, because it deflects attention from the CIA and puts the blame on the mafia, and they make a glorified captain as the brains behind this whole thing. And it's absolutely ridiculous. And anybody who believes it doesn't know anything about the structure of Cosa Nostra in this country, Bill.
Right. Yep.
So that's about it, Billy.
All right. Well, speaking of La Cosa Nostra, we have a related topic again this week. We are going to be talking about the most infamous and to that point, the most lucrative robbery or heist in American history, the Lufthansa heist.
Yeah, and we're going to touch, Bill, on the movie too, Goodfellas, because it was kind of, I'm going to say loosely based, because we now know that a lot of it's not really accurate. Right,
there were a lot of differences. They didn't really portray it as it happened in real life, but. Of course, that happens with every movie. We just talked about that, right? So
yeah.
All right, Sean, let's get into the Lufthansa heist.
All right, Billy. So before we get into the actual specifics of the heist, we got to go over to some of the characters. We're going to talk a lot about Jimmy the Gentleman Burke, who was played brilliantly in the movie Goodfellas by Robert De Niro. They changed the name in the movie to Jimmy Conway, because Burke was still alive. He was in prison at the time. We're going to talk about Henry Hill, who was played by Ray Liotta in the movie. We're going to talk about Tommy DeSimone, who was played unbelievably by Joe Pesci.
Right.
And we're going to talk about Paulie Vario, who was played by the great Paul Sorvino.
Yeah. And also in the movie, we have to point out a lot of the movie was based on the book Wise Guy, which was essentially the what Henry Hill gave. It was basically his side of the story. There wasn't, we didn't get a lot of other points of view. It was essentially just Henry Hill talking to Nick Pileggi, who wrote Wise Guy.
And like all these guys, Bill, they pump themselves up. Like Henry Hill basically was a punk who, for whatever reason, Jimmy Burke liked him and protected him. And all of the respect, that Hill got came from his association with Burke. And Jimmy Burke, Bill, there's no other way to describe this. We talk about the relationship between the Irish gangster, the Jewish gangster, and the American Cosa Nostra. And we talk about the like sometimes you have like a Whitey Bulger who runs his own crew, Irish crew, and the Westies run their own crew, and Mickey Cohen in LA ran his own Jewish gang, but they work with the Italian mafia. And then you have other gangsters like a Jimmy Burke, like a Meyer Lansky, who is Jewish, who actually work within the structure, Bill, and actually they look like a regular member of the mafia. There's no other way to say that. And those two guys, Burke and Lansky, were the most powerful associates, I think, in the history of organized crime. Would you agree with that, Billy?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely.
Because there's no way, when you look at Jimmy Burke, he looks like an underboss of the Lucchese family.
Right.
Even though he was full-blooded Irish and couldn't be a made guy. Him and Paul Vario, who was actually a captain, was acting like he was an acting boss, though, because a lot of their leadership was in prison. And Vario was acting like the boss, and Jimmy Burke is like the underboss. And there's no other way to describe this, Bill. And just a quick story of a scene in the movie that shows you the power of Jimmy Burke, the whole shine box thing, Billy.
Right.
Where, in the movie, this Billy Batts, who was a made guy in the Gambino family, he insults Tommy DeSimone, played by Pesci, and they end up whacking him, Bill. Now, that's not really what happened, how it went down. What happened was Billy Batts was actually a guy, Billy Van Veda, who was a made guy in the Gambinos. And when he goes to jail, Jimmy Burke is asked by him and by the Gambinos to look after his operations, Bill, because Burke is so powerful within the Lucchese family. He's actually partners with John Gotti at the JFK airport, hijacking trucks. They two of them, they split everything up and they work together. And Burke is takes over Van Veda's action, and he actually quadruples it, Bill. Right. Yeah. So what happens is when Van Veda gets out of prison, he says to Burke, "Thanks for watching over it. Now I want my action back." And Burke tells him basically get lost.
Yeah.
And Billy Batts ends up making a beef about it. And Burke and Vario decide that they're going to take him out. And they basically, it's not like it was a spontaneous thing in the movie, Bill. It was an actually planned hit. And they end up killing Billy Batts. And all the bosses look the other way, Bill. Because what is it we always talk about, Bill? What's it about with these guys?
Money.
Making money.
About money. And they would rob the airport. I think, they said it like in the movie. It was like an ATM for them. They would, whenever they needed money, they would rob. First it was Idlewild. And then after it became JFK, they would just, whenever they needed money, they would just go rob the airport.
Right. And that's what it's about with these guys, Bill. And the thing is, if it was really about like a club or a partnership or whatever you want to call it, Bill, they would have sided with Billy Batts, but he was a made guy, but it didn't matter. This is the power that Jimmy Burke has. So that's why, I want to set it up with that story just to tell everybody, even though Jimmy Burke was Irish and he wasn't a made guy, he's really like an underboss of the Lucchese family. There's no other way to say it, Billy.
Yeah.
So let's get into the specifics, Bill.
All right.
So Monday, 3 a.m., December 11, 1978. Okay. at the padlock gate, a van pulls up, and 6-7 men wearing ski masks drive up to it, and they cut the padlock and they drive around to the loading dock, and they jump one of the Lufthansa workers, Bill. Okay, and then they force the security guard inside to open up the door, and the burglars go in, and they know right where to go, Billy. Okay, and then they force the night supervisor to disconnect the silent alarm, and then they force them to take him to the high value room on the first floor, so they know exactly what they're looking for. And then they gather up the other workers and they put them in a cafeteria and they handcuff them. Okay, and one worker tries to be a hero and he ends up getting pistol whipped. Now, the supervisor is forced to open up the safe, and they take 30 shipments of gold, pearls, jewelry, checks. And they, like I said, Bill, they know exactly what they're looking for. And all this money was flowing in from Frankfurt. And we're going to get into the specifics, Bill. I'm just setting up the official story.
Yeah.
But this money, Bill, was already in circulation. So there's no record of serial numbers and it couldn't be traced. And that's important. You know, so how in the world did this whole thing come about? Well, you know, Jimmy Burke ran a crew in Ozone Park, Queens, out of Robert's Lounge. And he had a crew they were Irish gangsters, Italian, Jewish. And like I said, he was like the underboss of the Chasey family, Bill. And, you know, Joe Coffey, who we talked about in episodes before, the NYPD detective who investigated a lot of these guys, he said a great statement about Jimmy Burke. He said, Jimmy Burke was such an earner that the amount that he earned brought respect to the mob that even the Italian heritage couldn't bring, which is what I talked about, Bill. It didn't matter that Jimmy Burke wasn't Italian. He brought in so much money, and he knew how to spread it around to the top bosses, Bill, in the commission, the five families.
Yeah.
So he was a powerhouse, Bill. He was making money in bookmaking, untaxed cigarette smuggling, loan sharking. But the thing he loved to do, and they mentioned this in the movie, he loved to steal, Bill, and he loved to hijack trucks out of JFK. And him and John Gotti shared the airport, Bill. Gotti's crew would take half the action, and Jimmy Burke would take the other half, and they would spread the money around to the top bosses. And they were jacking a couple of trucks a week, Bill, at that airport.
Yeah.
So the whole way that this thing started, it didn't really originate with Jimmy Burke. It originated with a cargo worker at the airport by the name of Peter Grunwald. And he actually came up with the plan, Bill. And he went to another co-worker by the name of Lou Warner, okay, to see if he knew anyone that could execute this, because those two guys were just airport workers. They didn't have the skills to pull this off. So Warner was a big gambler, and he was heavily in debt. And he kind of backstabs Grunwald, and he goes to his bookmaker, his bookie, a guy by the name of Mark Mena, and he tells him what they want to do here, and he's hoping that Mena would, ease up on the debt that he owes. But Mena's kind of a mid-sized bookie, Bill, so he goes to a even bigger bookie by the name of Martin Krugman, who's in the movie, Bill.
Right. He's it's Maury, right? The Maury's Wigs guy.
Yep, that's him.
Yep.
And he's a big bookmaker, Bill. And he goes to Henry Hill. And the reason these guys are going to different people, Bill, is because they always want somebody fronting. This is the way this works. So if something goes wrong, they have a guy fronting for them. So he goes to Henry Hill because he knows Henry Hill is close to Jimmy Burke. And Krugman doesn't want to bring this directly to Burke in case something goes wrong. So he goes to Hill, and Hill goes to Jimmy Burke. And Jimmy Burke hears about all this, and he loves it, Bill. He loves the idea. He understands what's coming into that airport, what this could be, this heist could be. He understands it. And he starts to bring in members of his crew. And the first two guys he brings in is Frenchie McMahon and Joe Buddha Mancrease. Okay. And he tells them to go see this guy, Lou Warner, and get the details. Now, this is important, Bill, because Frenchie and Buddha are going to be the only two guys that Warner's ever going to see from Burke's crew. Okay. And they go to him, and Warner tells them all about the specifics. And then they go back and they tell Jimmy Burke. So Jimmy gets more and more guys in his crew. He gets Vincent Asaro, who we're going to talk about later because he would end up being a big name down the road. Jimmy gets his own son, Frankie, and both his sons, Bill, were named after Frank and Jesse James, Bill. So just like in the movies, this guy loved to be a gangster.
Yeah.
Angelo Zeppo was another one. Tommy DeSimone, who we talked about, played by Joe Pesci. They called him Tommy Two Guns because he always carried two guns. And here's the important thing, Bill. Jimmy Burke clears the plan with Paulie Vario. So you understand that this is what an underboss would do: go to his boss, clear the plan before taking any action. So he's working within that structure of Cosa Nostra. And Jimmy Burke puts the plan into effect, but he tells Frenchie and Buddha to tell Warner to watch the cargo logs for any big shipment of cash coming in from Europe, okay? And they were going to set this plan up for closer to around Christmas to do the heist. Mm-hmm. But if Warner's seen anything coming in, notify them, and they'd be on standby to execute this and expedite it, Bill. Because the shipments coming in from Europe, was money exchanged for euros. So there's no serial numbers on them. They're all in small bills. It's almost like taking candy from a candy store, Bill. And what happened is the money came in from Germany, okay? And it came in on a Friday, Bill, after the Brink trucks left. Right. So Warner understands that this money is going to have to be held over there for the weekend until the Brinks trucks come back on Monday. So
wasn't there a Jewish holiday on Monday? I thought that was either in the book or the movie. I can't remember. I thought there was a Jewish holiday on Monday, and then they wouldn't. So that meant they wouldn't have gotten the trucks there until Tuesday.
Yeah, you might be right on that, Billy. You might be right. I'm not certain on that, but I just know that the money wasn't going to be distributed on that Friday, so it had to be. Right. Like this came in after the trucks already left. So either way, it was going to be on Monday or Tuesday. It didn't matter because they didn't have this plan, Bill. They had this plan for weeks down the road, closer to Christmas. This is December 11th. They had this closer to Christmas.
Right. Yeah.
So when Burke hears this, he puts the plan into effect. And, what happens is, Warner goes to Buddha and Frenchie and tells them, what's going down, and then Burke executes the plan. He has everybody on standby, and they expedite the plan, and it was run to precision, Bill, and $5 million, almost $6 million plus jewelry. And at the time, the biggest heist in America, Bill, was the Boston Brinks job from the 1950s.
Wow.
And this was way bigger than that.
Yeah.
And as the information's coming in, Bill, the authorities are wondering who could be behind this, and the numbers of what they actually stole is coming out, and it's getting bigger and bigger. And Joe Coffey, the great detective, is sitting there, and he said, everybody's wondering who's behind this, and he said there was no doubt in his mind, as soon as he heard about it, that there was only one guy in New York that could have pulled this off, and that was Jimmy Burke.
Yeah.
And the NYPD and the FBI steps up efforts to watch Robert's Lounge, where Burke is running operations out of. And Coffey talks a lot about, Bill, how the NYPD and the FBI did not work good together. The FBI wanted to take over every investigation. The NYPD had their own organized crime task force, and they didn't work good together. And they're trying to watch, Robert's Lounge. And what happens, Bill, is Burke in the movie now, it's portrayed a little different of how everything went down. Burke only gave a small percentage to the guys in his crew. What him and Vario take the most of the money, and they give a cut to their bosses. Right. So they spread it out with the other 4 families, Bill.
So, but there's a couple other differences, kind of big differences too, Sean.
Right.
One of them is it was a little bit more violent than what was portrayed. I mean, in the movie, basically, he slipped him a key under the
and he walked right in,
door, and he walked right in and walked out with, and nothing ever happened. And what actually happened was they took a couple of guys hostage. They had to.
Well, they did. They took them in the cafeteria.
Yeah.
Handcuffed them. The one guy got to be like a hero, and they pistol whipped them.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't like it was. Like you said in the movie, they just walked right in and walked right out like it was nothing.
Right. The other thing is, Sean, I don't know if you're going to mention this. You're going to mention the van.
With Stacks, yeah, I'm going to get into that.
Okay. All right.
Because Bill, like in the movie, like they're going to portray that, Burke starts killing everybody because, the guys were spending money and stuff. But the truth is, he only gave him a small percentage, and they did blow it. I mean, they did go out partying and blew, but he only gave him a small percentage. But what happens is one of the guys in Jimmy's crew, a guy by the name of Stacks Edwards, who was played in the movie by who, right, Bill?
Samuel L. Jackson. Yep.
Yeah. And what Stacks was supposed to do is he was supposed to get rid of the van, and he was supposed to take it to a mob-controlled what do you call it? Junkyard.
Yeah, it was John Gotti's junkyard.
Right, and they were going to crush it.
Right.
And get rid of it. But what happens is Stacks gets drunk, and the van gets discovered, Bill. And it's all on the news that they find prints inside the van. And Jimmy knew it had to be Stacks' prints because nobody else was dumb enough to not wear gloves.
Yeah.
And what happens next, Bill, is Jimmy, Burke, and Paul Vario go absolutely nuts. In the next 6 months, they start whacking everybody. And it wasn't because, the Stacks is going to get whacked. They're going to talk about that because of the mistake he made. But the rest of it is because they didn't want to share this money, Bill, with anybody lower than them. Right. They already shared the money with the top bosses in the other families. So, what happens next is Stacks is the first guy, Bill. Stacks is the first guy to get killed on this murder spree by Burke and Vario.
And that was only a week after the heist.
Stacks was, yeah. But this whole thing, Bill, it's going to be like a 6-month span where like more than a dozen people are getting whacked. I mean, they're whacking girlfriends and everybody. Yep. Anybody that knew about the heist or had any small part in it. But the one thing I want to point out, though, another thing in Goodfellas, Bill, is Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario, brilliantly played by De Niro and Servino, but they're really downplayed. Like those characters are watered down, Bill.
Yeah. To
how violent these two guys were. Because these two guys were extremely violent. And what happens next is, everybody's going to get whacked. So Stacks is the first guy, like you said, shortly after he has his big screw up, and they send Tommy DeSimone to whack him, and he shoots him and he kills him. And then the next guy to go is Marty Krugman. And it's different from in the movie, Bill, because in the movie, him and his wife's body is found. But what really happened is Krugman disappeared. Body was never found. Okay. Another guy, Richie Eaton, is the next guy to go. He's discovered hanging in a meat locker. Then next you had Tom Monteleone. He disappears, never to be found. Then you had Louis Cafara, disappears, no body ever found. His wife, Joanna Cafara, also disappears, never to be found.
And they're the ones in the movie that the character in the movie, his name is Johnny Roast Beef. He's the guy that buys his wife the pink Cadillac, and Jimmy starts yelling at him in the bar, don't buy anything. I told you not to buy anything. So that's and then they find, but in the movie they find them in the Cadillac, the two of them murdered, but in real life they never found them.
Yeah, they just disappeared. Yeah. And then the next two is important, Bill, because the same day that Lou Warner is arrested, and I'm going to talk about that, Joe Buda and Frenchie McMahon are found dead in a parked car, both shot in the back of the head. And this is important, Bill, because those are the only two guys that could tie Burke's crew to Warner. Warner, didn't know it. He didn't meet anybody else in the crew. And these guys are found shot to death. And then next is a Sicilian-born gangster that was in Jimmy's crew, Paulo LaCastria. And he's discovered, Bill, his body's naked and his bullet-ridden, and he's burned in a trash heap. So they were making a statement with that one. And then the next one is probably the most important of these, is Tommy DeSimone, okay? And he disappeared, Bill. And his girlfriend, Teresa, also disappears. And she's later found dismembered floating near the Toms River, New Jersey. Now, in the movie, Bill, it's portrayed that, Jimmy Burke he didn't know nothing about this, and he was really broken up, and they showed De Niro's crying, and he's so upset that his buddy got killed. Yeah. Him and Vario ordered the execution of Tommy DeSimone, Billy. I mean, there's no doubt about that now. So what happens is, all these people get killed, Bill. I don't know what I just mentioned, 12, 13, 14 people in like a 6-7 month span are just gone.
Right. Yep.
And the investigation keeps ramping up, and they're stepping up efforts to go after Jimmy Burke. Because like Coffey said, he knows who's behind it. It's just a matter of getting to these guys. And the thing is, Coffey says a lot of the lower level guys, like his words, they're not brain surgeons. So those are the guys he wanted to go after, try to get them, flip them. But Burke whacked them all. So they tried a surveillance on Robert's Lounge. They put bugs in there, but there were so many people in there, Bill, that all they're picking up is various conversations. They couldn't center on one particular conversation. So that was useless. They tried to put a bug in Jimmy Burke's house, kind of like they would do down the road with Castellano.
Right. But
they couldn't get it. It wasn't successful, Bill. Jimmy was so conscious of this stuff. They tried several attempts, and they couldn't get a bug in his house. So then they focus on the two guys that really aren't gangsters, the workers at the airport, Lou Warner and Grunwald, instead of Jimmy Burke. So the investigation, points at those guys. And then May 16, 1979, Warner's actually convicted in his role in the heist. But he could have rat out Jimmy Burke, Bill, because Warner never met Jimmy Burke. The two guys he met was Frenchie McMahon and Joe Buddha, and Burke had both of them guys whacked.
Yeah.
So eventually, 1980, Henry Hill gets arrested for narcotics, and he didn't give up Lufthansa, though. And there's a reason for that, Bill, I'm going to get to. Hill gave up. He testified about a lot of other crimes that Burke and Vario committed. The most important one was the Boston College point shaving scandal that Burke was running.
Yeah.
And also for the murder of Richie Eaton. And Vario was convicted of racketeering, and he dies in prison. Burke would later die 1996 in prison. But the reason that Henry Hill didn't give up anything on Lufthansa, Bill, is because I don't think he knew anything about it.
Right, exactly. And that's probably the reason why he didn't get murdered. Because of right, because he wasn't involved with it at all.
He didn't know anything. The only thing he knew is when he took that, information and gave it to Jimmy, and then after that, because Jimmy Burke understood that Henry Hill was pretty much useless, Bill.
Yeah,
he understood that something like this is nothing Hill could do to help him in this, and he brought in the guys in his crew that were important, and everybody that he brings in plays a specific role. It might have been just a fence, Bill. To worry about the stolen jewelry, every guy played a little role. And what happens, Bill, is 2014, a big story breaks that one of the guys in Burke's crew, Vincent Asaro, who at that time was 80 years old now, and he's also moved up. He's a captain of the Bonanno crime family at this time. And he's arrested for his role in Lufthansa, Bill. And apparently he talked to an informant about it, and he was bitching about Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario screwed him out of his cut because they at the time Massaro was just a low-level guy, and Burke and Vario screwed all them guys. And he was bitching about that, but he would later be acquitted. And, you know, that was basically the end of this. Nobody ever went to jail, you know, besides Lou Warner. Nobody was convicted, and nobody from Burke's crew was ever, you know, convicted of this. And to summarize the bill, it's just, you know, there's no honor among thieves, because
right.
Burke and Vario kept all the money. They shared it with the guys above them, or, you know, laterally, and they didn't give hardly anything to the guys below them, and they didn't want to pay them, so they whacked them all.
Yeah.
You know,
and none of the money or jewelry was ever recovered.
No. And it was over $6 million. It's still the biggest heist in U.S. history, Bill.
That's amazing that it still is.
And it just goes to show you, Bill. And you know what? One thing, Bill, we talk about this all the time. When you get an Irish gangster and an Italian gangster working together, like almost like a partnership, like Vario and Burke have, it's almost like a force that can't be stopped. Like, you think about it, Bill, how many times we talk about this, like Danny Green and John Nardi in Cleveland, you know, Jimmy Coonan and Roy DeMeo, Whitey Bulger and Stephen the Rifleman Fleming. I mean, it's almost like when you get an Irishman and Italian working together, they're a force, Bill.
Yeah.
And Burke and Vario were an absolute force, and they're totally downplayed in the movie, you know. And that's not to take anything away from De Niro and Sorvino, because they're great.
Oh yeah.
You know, they're just playing a role that you know the writers put in there. But I mean, those guys were so violent, Bill. And some of those hits we now, you know, like Coffey suspects that Jimmy Burke actually did a couple of those hits himself, Bill.
Yeah.
Some of them they ordered, but what's that?
I said that wouldn't surprise me.
No. Especially, I think, you know, the one they focused on, the Joe Buda, Frenchie McMahon, they think Burke executed those two guys himself.
Yeah.
Because Burke knew that those guys could tie him to Warner. So they had to go. And he had to make sure that was done perfectly, you know, and it's just an amazing story, Bill. And you know, Joe Coffey, he could never get Burke on this, but he knew right from the beginning. And, you know, there's a lot of people that like to say Coffey, you know, isn't what he said he is. The guy has a hell of a resume as an NYPD detective, Billy.
Yeah, he sure does. Or did. Amazing.
Yeah. I mean,
what a story. And you know, the movie, again, it was part of that movie, and a lot of you know, a lot of basically, you know, Hollywood stuff was done. A lot of, you know, poetic license or creative license was taken in telling that story. It didn't happen exactly the way that you see it in the movie, but basically, you know, that's the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's still one of the greatest mob movies.
Oh,
of our time. There's no question about that. You know, it's just like you said earlier. It's from Henry Hill's point of view,
right? And
you know, Henry Hill was basically just this hanger on that hung around Jimmy Burke. You know, and for whatever reason, Burke liked him, but he knew his limitations, and I don't think he brought him into Lufthansa. Like, he didn't have him play any role in this, and this is why Hill couldn't say anything about it. He didn't know anything.
Yeah. And again, I think it's why he lived.
Right. I think you're right on that. And you know, the 2014 thing, Bill, was really interesting because, you know, it goes to show you, Bill, that here you got this guy, Vincent Asaro, who at the time of Lufthansa was just he was one of Jim Burke's crew. And here he goes on to be a made guy, and he moves over from Lucchese to Bonanno, and he becomes a captain in the Bonanno family. So it goes to show you what kind of powerhouse and what kind of crew Jimmy Burke had back in the day, Bill.
Yeah. Yep.
So he was a powerhouse, Billy. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, this was a good one, Billy.
It was a good one for sure. Well, we can't do an episode related to Goodfellas without me doing a reenactment of a scene. If I did one from Gotti, I have to do from Goodfellas, right, Sean?
Well, definitely, Bill. And you're still getting compliments from your Gotti one, Bill. So now you got to see, can you step your game up, Billy?
Well, this
pressure, buddy.
This might be my what I submit for my Oscar recognition.
Oh, all right. Big words, buddy.
All right. Everybody's going to know what this scene is. I'm not even going to have to give you the background. All right. You ready?
Go ahead.
Here we go. What's really funny is at the fucking bank job away in Secaucus, I'm in the middle of the fucking weeds laying down. He comes over. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm resting." "Here, you resting?" "I'm at the fucking beach at a park. I know I'm resting. I'm resting." They pull me in. They start giving me all kinds of questions, this and that. He says, "What are you going to tell us today, tough guy?" I said, "My usual, zero, nothing." "What am I going to tell you, fuck?" He says, "No, you're going to tell me something today, tough guy." I said, "Okay, I'll tell you something. Go fuck your mother." You saw the paper, Anthony. My hair was up like this. So now I'm coming around and coming out of it. Who do I see in front of me again? This big prick. He says, "What are you going to tell me now, tough guy?" I said, "Bing, what are you still doing here? I thought I told you to go fuck your mother." Bing, pow. You're a pistol. You're really funny. You're really funny. "What do you mean I'm funny?" "It's funny, you know. It's a good story. It's funny. You're a funny guy." "No, what do you mean? What do you mean? The way I talk? What?" "It's just, you know, just you're funny. It's funny, you know, the way you tell a story and everything." "Funny how? What's funny about it?" Tommy, no, you got it all wrong." "No, Anthony, he's a big boy. He knows what he said." "What'd you say? Funny how?" "Just what? Just, you know, you're funny." "You mean, let me understand this, because, you know, maybe it's me. I'm a little fucked up, maybe. But I'm funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown. I amuse you. I make you laugh. I'm here to fucking amuse you. What do you mean funny? Funny how? How am I funny? Just, you know, how you tell a story. What? No, I don't know. You said it. How do I know? You said I'm funny. How the fuck am I funny? What the fuck is so funny about me? Tell me what's funny." "Get the fuck out of here, Tommy." "You motherfucker. I almost had him, you stuttering prick, you." "Frankie, was he shaking? I wonder about you sometimes, Henry. You may fold under questioning." All right. And scene. That's it.
Wow, Billy. I'll tell you what, buddy. You got to be getting a calls after that one. You got to be, Billy. That was good, buddy.
It was all right.
You had your Pesci down, buddy. You had your Pesci down. And listen, Billy, one of the things in the movie, Joe Coffey talked about, you know, Tommy DeSimone was a total psychopath. So yeah. Pesci played him great. He played, that was one role that it was written perfectly. It was acted perfectly. And it was pretty close to the way Tommy DeSimone really was. He was a psychopath.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no question, you know, he was close to Jimmy Burke and Paul Vario, but in the end, you know, there's no doubt about it, Bill. You know, Burke ended up taking him out. You know, he ordered that. And in the movie, they twist it and they make it like, you know, he was all shaken up about it, and nah, it didn't happen that way, buddy.
Yeah, well, they say, you know, it's your best friend that's going to do it, right?
That's right, buddy. That's the way it happens. And you know, no honor among thieves, Billy. That's the, you know,
that's for sure.
Lesson learned in this episode, buddy.
That's for sure. All right, Sean. Well, we'll wrap it up. Another great episode. Lufthansa Heist. Amazing story. So, all right, man.
All right, buddy.
And that's enough out of you.
Have a good night, everybody.